Thank you for joining us on our today's special coffee break with our colleagues from the Career and Development Office. Thank you guys for tuning in and being part of this. Just a few things before we get started, few housekeeping items. Make sure that you keep your camera on or off. You're welcome to have it on if you'd like, but make sure that you keep yourself muted throughout the session. If you have any questions, enter them in the chat box, and we will be answering these questions along the way, as well as towards the end of our session. So just a few things. My name is Yubi Aranda Sandoval. I am one of the assistant directors here in the Office of Alumni Engagement at UNCG. I am leading a couple of our programs, and one of them being our professional development piece for our alumni. This is why we have our coffee breaks. We bring you professional development workshops that you can find useful for yourself or for other colleagues, and you are welcome to share. But it is mainly for our alumni and providing these services so you can, move forward and find the best career fit for you. So I also work with our book club and other affinity groups, mainly our Latinx and other diversity and inclusion groups on campus. Among other things, duties as assigned. So let me introduce you to the Career Development Office. They are actually in the EUC located, and with us today, our host is Justin Goulding. He is the Assistant Director and Career Coach, and also serves as a coordinator for the PCA program at UNC Greensboro. He is an alumnus of the UNC Greensboro Counseling and Educational Development Master's Program, class of 2016, and also an alumnus of the Appalachian State University, where he studied political science with a criminal justice minor. Justin loves working one-on-one with students and helping them find their passion and help create long-term career goals. He is also skilled, also skilled at helping students prepare for interviews and articulating their strengths. Justin is both an MBTI and strong interest inventory certified. Thank you so much, Justin. You have so much under your belt to share, and we are so happy to have you. Thank you. You may take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much. First, I'd like to thank alumni for putting together this wonderful event for us. And also, I'd like to introduce my colleagues at Career and Professional Development, Megan, Christina, and Stephanie. All of them are wonderful career coaches. Some of y'all might be meeting with them or me next Tuesday on the virtual career coaching appointments, but I wanted to give them an opportunity just to introduce themselves so that you can put a face with a name, and they will be monitoring the chat as we go forward. So Megan?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Yubi and Justin, and thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to offer you some support today and moving forward, and we look forward to answering your questions. So thanks for taking some time to have coffee with us today.
Hey everyone, Stephanie Larson here. I'm also an assistant director and career coach in career and professional development, and I'm so excited to be here with all of you. I actually see some names that I already recognize for folks who scheduled appointments with me, so I can't wait to meet with you next week. And I'm really excited to get to learn a little bit more about you guys as well too.
Hi everybody, my name is Christina Faduke. I'm also one of the assistant directors and career coaches in the office. I primarily work with the School of Health and Human Sciences and the School of Nursing, so if you're a graduate from either one of those, feel free to reach out to me. But looking forward to talking with everybody next week that has an appointment.
Thank y'all so much. And I just wanted to extend a thank you to everyone who is attending today. I know that 2020 has been a really rough and challenging year for so many people. I hope everyone is safe and healthy and that your loved ones are also doing well. So I just wanted to mention that at the very beginning. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. So today we're going to be talking about fine-tuning your resume. And we've got some poll questions just so that we can gather some information at the very beginning. So the first poll that we are going to ask is, do you have a Handshake account? And I know there might be some people who are just like, what's Handshake? There might be some people who have just recently graduated who are just like, yes, I definitely have a Handshake account. But take a couple minutes, look over the options. Okay, I see the results coming in. Okay, I see about 21 people have voted, 23. Okay, just give a couple more seconds. Okay, so as we can see, it looks like a lot of people have utilized it in the past 6 months. And I do want to say, I love Handshake. It's one of it really is one of the best databases that I've utilized. I know our job postings tripled when we switched over from Spartan Careers to Handshake, because Handshake is a national platform. It originally started out of, I believe, Eastern Michigan, but now it's based in the Bay Area. But it is a wonderful, great platform. And today, after I talk about resumes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of how you can utilize that if you are currently searching, in the process of searching for a job. So I see that we have about 26% that haven't utilized it yet. So you're in for a treat today. Second question is, what is your current employment situation? Just because I know that there are several people that could be gainfully employed. Some people might be actively searching for new opportunities. So we just want to know that information. Okay, we got some results coming in. And also I see that we've got a couple people here for graduate school. And I know that we, in addition to resumes and CVs for graduate school, I do want to put in the plug that we also review personal statements for graduate school. Okay, so we've got about 22 people voted. Okay. So it looks like a lot of majority is that you are currently employed, but you are looking for new opportunities. And I know that there are several alumnus I have met with in the past who are in that same category. I know sometimes, due to the fact that a job may, just feel a little bit repetitive or looking for a new challenge or opportunity. I also know that unfortunately, as I mentioned before, with the year 2020, some people have been furloughed, some people have unfortunately lost their job. I know I have a close family member who unfortunately was furloughed, so I definitely understand that that can be a challenging time period. Some people are happily employed and they may just be practicing for that next chapter in their life, whether they're applying to be promoted. And then, as I mentioned, there are a couple people here for the graduate school. And then the final question, what is your biggest obstacle when looking for employment, when looking for work? And that could include anything from like the job openings. That could include that some of the positions have been frozen, or there might be a hiring pause at an institution that you're looking at. It may be that you're submitting documents and may not be getting a call back, or it could be that you have been coming in for an interview and you're not getting a call back after the interview. Okay, we've got about 20 people, it looks like, who have voted. Okay, so it looks like a lot of people find themselves in the category of not getting a call back once they've applied. So I definitely understand that that can be a frustrating feeling. I know a lot of students and alumni that I meet one-on-one with, there is a lot of frustration not even getting the automated message. So I definitely understand that that could be a position a lot of people are in. I also know that there's a lot of companies that may have different positions put on hold, whether that's at a university level, corporate, nonprofit. So I know that there could be a lot of people struggling. And then also the opportunity of finding job openings themselves. So I'll be happy to talk about that when talking about Handshake. So thank you all for taking the poll. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen so that I can showcase the presentation. Now we're going to get started. So when thinking about your resume, this is a strategic targeted document that highlights your skills and your experiences. And you always want to think about who is viewing this resume. You want to think about that when you were describing your skills, both hard skills and soft skills. You want to think about that with your education background and also with your experiences, because both paid and unpaid experiences can be included on your resume. And before we get started, this presentation is for everyone. We're going to talk about it from the perspective of if you're going into education, nonprofit, corporate. I know one of the biggest questions I get is about page length with the resume. And with that question, it really depends. A lot of times we recommend 1 page, especially if you have recently graduated from the university. Another good rule of thumb, one of our colleagues, Brittany, actually mentioned this to us one time, but a page per degree. If you are a more advanced master's level student, it would be more appropriate to have 2 pages. If you are currently going for your PhD, it might be more appropriate to have 3 pages. And sometimes it can be industry specific. I know from talking with job recruiters in the corporate and also healthcare, they often prefer the 1 page just because there's such a high volume of people applying for those types of positions. But as we mentioned before, the resume is designed to get you an interview. It's not designed to get you a job. It's designed to get you an interview with the employer. And so you want to think about, how am I describing my past job experiences, what I'm currently doing? And with the poll that we recently took, talking about that frustration of applying for a position but never hearing back, a lot of times that can be because when we are submitting a resume, submitting a cover letter, we are not capturing the attention of the employer, whether that's going through the ATS tracking system or whether it's being looked at by the search committee. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing the terminology that the employer is utilizing. And this is important because I don't know if any of y'all have ever heard the myth of like 6 seconds or however long a hiring manager looks at a person's resume. But that resume, they can look at 6 seconds and decide based on the information or what's popping out to them, whether to seriously consider that person's candidacy or move on to the next candidate. So as you can see with these 2 resume examples in front of us, it shows the heat images of where the human eye is looking at that information. The one on the left, it's a big wall of text. And, sometimes I know that you could be the best writer in the world, but if your information's bogged down in multiple paragraphs, it might not be easy to read for the employer. Whereas the one on the right, they're utilizing bullet points with strong action verbs. They've included their education section. So it's important to think about, how is this coming across to the employer? How is my information? How is my past work experience? Is my education section readable? Because I've had students and I've had alumnus submit documents before where their education is at the very bottom. It's unclear what they majored in because they may have majored in multiple things, or they may have accidentally formatted their minor so that it looks like a major. So you always want to think about, how is my information coming across to the employer? So the essential ingredients of the resume, your contact information is always going to be at the very top, and your name is always going to be bolded, and it's always going to be larger than everything else on the resume. Usually 14 to 20 point font, and you're going to want to make sure you include your email and your telephone number so that the employer knows how to contact you. And with your education, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that that is either the first or the second section on your resume, just because whether you've achieved your bachelor's, whether you graduate with your master's, your PhD, that is a huge accomplishment. And we are definitely proud of the work our students have done here at the university. So you want to make sure that you are shining a spotlight on your education in your resume. And you want to make sure you put the full name of your degree. So if it's Master of Fine Arts, if it's Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, even if it's a postdoctoral or post-bac certificate, you want to make sure that you are being specific with what degree or certification you received here from the university. And also your graduation date so that the employer knows when you graduated. And as I mentioned, work, volunteer, leadership experience, all of this can be examined, all of this can be utilized to tell an employer why you would make an excellent candidate for their specific company, for their specific position. Make sure that you include appropriate position titles, date range. You want to be consistent because I see a lot of students and also alumnus documents we look at, they are not consistent with the dates. So make sure you're consistent with the dates. Make sure you're including the appropriate location and make sure the bullet points are consistent because that could also be something that could confuse the ATS tracking system. So you want to make sure that everything is neat, organized, and laid out appropriately. So with the layout, every job recruiter I've ever talked with, they want to see reverse chronological order first. If you are currently working, they want to see what you're currently doing now in relation to what you've done 5 years ago. So more recent always comes first, and then you are going to go backwards. And I know that right here with the layout, we have two different types, and I wanted to explain this a little bit to everyone. So there are a couple of different stylistic choices you can make with a resume. One is the traditional, which 9 times out of 10, we are always going to recommend, but there's also the functional. And with the functional, I would only recommend that if you've been working full-time for 5 years or more, just because functional, it's a great way for you to still have a one-page resume, and it's more skills and abilities focused. So let's say, for example, you've been working for 5 to 10 years, and you've had multiple jobs within the same industry. And a lot of those responsibilities, and a lot of those jobs share the same responsibilities. So if you wanted to, you could do a skills and abilities section where you're focusing on your leadership skills, your technology skills, managerial skills, and interpersonal skills. And then you have your work experience in more of a list format. That way, if you're applying for a promotion or you're applying for a job in corporate or healthcare, you can still have that one-page resume. However, we often recommend the more traditional resume just because many people, you know, especially if you graduate within the last 5 years, don't have as much work experience as people who utilize the functional. And then with the traditional, you're able to say with each specific place, these are the positive results of my work with this specific company. So I did want to say that there is some stylistic changes or opportunities that you can utilize. Traditional versus functional, more often than not, we recommend traditional. So with the basic rules, and we've heard several job recruiters mention this, you want to avoid templates. And the main reason for this is that there are literally millions of people using the same template. And every day at UNC Greensboro, we approve and review documents in the handshake queue just because we want to make sure that everyone has the best opportunity of getting the job that they desire, applying for a position and getting that interview. And when you see multiple templates, one after the other, you start to notice they all look the same. They all have weird colors. Some of them have very strange fonts. Some of them are very, very controlling in the fact that you could put in several lines of description for your job, but the font will get smaller because the box is preset. So when you're utilizing a template, you don't have autonomy of your resume. And that can be difficult because a resume is going to be a lifelong document. You're always going to be updating it. You're always going to be changing the terminology depending on the job that you're applying for. So you want to make sure that you have control over your document so that it will be a lifelong document and you will be able to change it. Also, as I mentioned, brief is best, 1 to 2 pages, preferably 1 page if you've most recently graduated with a bachelor's. An important thing is avoiding personal pronouns, just because when you state, you know, I worked with, I managed, I did different activities, that can definitely become repetitive. And we want to make sure that this is professional as possible. We want to make sure that the employer is looking at all the great activities that you've done in the past. So make sure you avoid personal pronouns. And one of the more important things, providing concrete detail. Now, I know from working with both students and alumnus that it can be a fine line when you're trying to keep your resume to one page and you're trying to provide all the necessary details. So usually when it comes to describing your work experience, for a bullet point, we usually recommend one sentence per bullet point and no more than 2 lines. Now, even though we want to be efficient with how we describe our work experience, we still want to provide concrete details. So let's say, for instance, you're in education and you are specifically teaching AP Algebra and you are working with 30+ students. We want that information in your resume. We want to know, who are you working with? We want to know what goal is it that you're working towards? We want to know how you've been able to either increase productivity, how you've been able to either be awarded a grant, or how you've raised money. But we want to know specifics. We want to know quantitative data when you were describing your past work experience. And then also prioritizing the information. So let's say, for instance, if you are a computer programmer, if you're a computer science alumnus, a lot of times individuals in that field, they will have their skills section in between their education and work experience, because being able to show the different types of programming languages that they specialize in is one of the more important things that an employer needs to know about. There are also some specific industries. I know that museum studies, they may want to know more about your academic work than they know about your part-time work experience. So you want to think about the prioritization of the information. How is it going to flow? And then also, as I mentioned, using bullet points for content, staying away from paragraphs, staying away from walls of text. And there are optional section headings that you can utilize depending on what you want to go into, whether that's research, whether that's specific internships. Also, study abroad is a great thing to include on your resume, or any type of international experience, just because the world's becoming a more global place. And if you have a link, or if you have an account with Handshake, there's actually a great website called Going Global that I'm going to talk about at the very end, where you can actually see various examples of resumes based on the country that you might be applying to work in if you're looking for international work. So there are several different sections, headings that you can include in your resume. And us at Career and Professional Development, as we are speaking with you either next week, or if you'd like to schedule a virtual appointment with us, we are more than happy to go in depth talking about any of these sections. Now, as I mentioned, contact information is always going to come first. And I do want to mention that your physical address is optional. Now, one reason that it is optional is because it could be a safety hazard, or it could be a safety concern. A lot of the jobs that you will definitely be applying for, you will be applying through various job database sites such as Handshake, could be Going Global, could be CareerShift or LinkedIn. So I understand that there could be some safety concerns with including your physical address. There's also some individuals, if you're doing long distance career exploration, whether that's applying for a job in California, applying for a job in Colorado, there could be some concerns if you include your physical address. Is that going to hinder my ability to interview with that company or that organization? And a lot of times when you're doing long distance career exploration, you can actually talk in your cover letter about your future plans, whether that's moving to a different area or whether you're going to be in a specific area during a specific time of the year. But with your contact information, name's always going to be bolded, always going to be 14 to 20 point font, and you're always going to include your telephone number and your email address. Now I want to talk a little bit about the objective and the profile section. I know that we received a question in advance about profile and summary qualifications. So an important thing to remember with the objective versus the profile and summary is that these are two separate things. When you're including an objective statement in your resume, what you are doing is you are providing a one-sentence statement, and it could be 1 line or 2 lines, basically stating what position you are applying for, and you're also providing highlights or skills that you bring to the table that would make you a great candidate for that position. So for this example of the objective, what I provided, I've got a friend who works at VF Corporation, So I did it from the perspective of them being a financial analyst. But if you're including an objective statement with your resume, you want to make sure it's specific to the position. So in this case, a financial analyst position with VF Corporation. And then you want to talk about the skill set that you bring to the table. So whether that's soft skills, hard skills, or specific knowledge. So if you know SPSS knowledge, or if you have a proven ability to build rapport with individuals, if you have that ability to look at market trends and make predictions, but you want to talk about the skill set and knowledge that you bring to the table that's going to separate you from another candidate. Now, as I mentioned before, objective is different than profile. Profile and summary qualifications, they are usually the same, and they are always going to be after the sorry about that. They're always going to be after the contact information, but they are usually about 4 bullet points. And what they talk about is your level of skill, your level of knowledge. It could even include whether you know secondary languages, or if you know a specific skill set or a specific knowledge of utilizing equipment. But basically, it's almost your greatest hits. For the job that you're applying for, you might talk about that I have 5 years of experience. If you're applying for a job with the city of Greensboro, you might say that you have 5 years of experience working specifically with local governments and knowledge of state law. You could even talk specifically about secondary language, and American Sign Language is also a secondary language. But you want to highlight what are some of the skills and knowledge that separate you from other people, and going back to that quantitative numbers, wanting to showcase that you have in-depth experience with a specific subject. Education is usually going to be, if you include an objective or a summary qualifications, education is going to go underneath it. If you choose not to include an objective or a summary qualifications, then education would go first on your resume after the contact information. And as I mentioned, reverse chronological order is important. And sometimes individuals will have both a major and a minor, or they may have a specific major and a specific concentration. So you always want to remember that your concentration and your minor goes after your full name of your degree. So if you have a Bachelor of Science in Sociology or a Bachelor of Science in Economics, if either of those had a specific concentration or a specific minor, you would include that information after the full name of the degree. And another important thing to include is your graduation date. So you are always going to go with the month and the year. That could be May, August, or December. And some optional things that you can include with your education. You can have your GPA as long as it's above a 3.0. And if you decide to do your major GPA, you would just need to make sure you label that major GPA. And also, if you're going to include relevant coursework, make sure it's higher level coursework. We do not want to include any intro classes or general education classes. We want to showcase higher level courses. So if you are studying either a 300, 400 level course, even a 500, 600 level course in your master's PhD, we want to show something specific, and we also want to make sure that it's specific to the employer, that it's something that would be beneficial for you to have knowledge of. And you can also include your study abroad in your education if you want to, including the name of the sibling institution you studied at and the semester that you were studying at that university in that country. So now with your work experience, this is where you want to provide some detail to the employers. And I want to take a little bit of time to really describe this, because a lot of times when individuals aren't getting callbacks when it comes to applying for different jobs, this is the section that they really need to work on. This is the section where you need to either adjust the terminology, you need to think about impact statements or providing specifics, because a lot of times employers will look at this section to make sure that you have a foundation that would be beneficial for the company that you are applying to. So as I mentioned before, making sure you have the name of the position, the full name of the company, appropriate location, and also making sure that your dates are consistent. We usually recommend month and year. I know that a lot of times people will put 2016 to 2019, or they will just put the year. That that leaves a lot of room for the employer to make assumptions. You never want to give the employer the opportunity to either put any doubt on your candidacy or to assume anything. You want to be specific. If you started in June 2016, state the month and the year, and then state the present if you're still working there. You want to make sure that you are in control of your narrative, that you are in control of the facts, and that you're not leaving any room for the employer to doubt your candidacy. So when describing experience, as I mentioned before, look at the job description, look at the terminology, look at the preferred qualifications. And if anybody is familiar with the website ONET Online, that is a great resource that you can go to take a look at some of the skill set, both soft skill and hard skill, that people in that industry utilize in that job every day. So when you're looking at the job description, when you're looking at ONET Online, you can see a breakdown of what they are specifically looking for in that position. So I would always recommend, when framing your past experience, think about how you can add either those description action verbs so that you can make a direct correlation. Also, we mentioned the no paragraphs, the no I statements, and you want to make sure that you're using the correct the correct verb tense. So present versus past tense for anything you've already completed, present for if you're currently working there. And think of the reader. How are you going to get them interested in your resume? So this is something that I love. I work a lot in my experience with humanities students in the College of Arts and Sciences. But if you are ever having any trouble thinking of how to describe experience, I always recommend to both students and to alumnus to think of the 3 C's. Because no matter what type of industry that you are going into, employers are always want to know how do you communicate with people, how do you collaborate with people, and how do you utilize your critical thinking skills. So when thinking about the 3 C's with communication, you could think about either written or spoken. How are you able to communicate with people? And how are you able to articulate information? How are you able to present this information to people on your team, to your supervisor? How are you able to make sure that either your vision is clear or you're able to make those connections with people by communicating? And then also collaboration. I like to say a lot of times that no person is an island. So employers want to know, how are you able to work with people on a team? How are you able to work on a shared goal? How are you able to provide direction? Or how are you able to persuade somebody? And whether you're in a managerial position, whether you are a coworker or a colleague, they always want to know, how are you able to work with people? How are you either able to get people to buy into your vision, or how are you able to work with people to develop their own vision? And then critical thinking. So critical thinking is something that's very important. It could encompass how you make plans, how you make decisions in a workplace setting, or how you're able to analyze information and how you're able to think on your feet and make a decision in a fast-paced setting. So with your critical thinking skills, a lot of times when we talk about showing your positive results, if you're a teacher and you're talking about how you're able to make a lesson plan, that's utilizing critical thinking skills. If you're working at a bank and you're looking at specific interest rates and how that would affect your specific clients, that's also utilizing your critical thinking skills. So you want to showcase to a prospective employer that I am somebody that is able to think about the situation, I'm able to make decisions, I'm able to participate in long-term planning, and not only am I able to make those goals, but I'm able to achieve those goals. So you always want to remember that you want to be achievement-oriented, you want to showcase what you've accomplished. So a good way of breaking that down is thinking about the impact statement, starting with your action verb, providing an example, and providing the results. So if you are specifically working with someone and helping them develop, whether that could be tutoring someone and taking their grade from a C- to a B+, or whether you are working with somebody in a specific group and you are in charge of training them during their first 3 months at a company, always show the positive results. Always think about who it is that you are working with, why it is that you are specifically working on this particular responsibility, when it happened, what it accomplished, where it was. So think about those details. And one bullet point is one idea or one sentence, and then no more than 2 lines. but always providing concrete examples. And this is just an example of the difference maker of putting that into action. So a lot of times, and I see this with many different people's resumes when they're using the template, a lot of people are vague when they are describing their past job experiences. So they could say that they just typed, they could just say phone coverage or just say customer service. But you want to showcase, let's take customer service for example. A lot of employers, they want people who have those interpersonal skills, who are able to work with people. So it's up to you to describe your narrative. It's up to you to showcase how those customer service skills go into action. So if you're able to utilize superior customer service skills to answer the phone, greet clients, and direct them to the appropriate party, you want to showcase that in your work experience. You want to showcase how you're able to interact with people and what the positive result of that was. So utilizing terms such as superior, excellent, proven, that's going to help increase your candidacy. So it's important to remember, you are in control of your narrative, because there's a lot of people who are going to be submitting resumes with very similar workplace experiences, but it's up to you to take control of that narrative to showcase to an employer, this is who I am as a candidate, this is why I'm important, this is why I'd make a great addition to your team. So remember, include numbers. Talk about your interpersonal skills for building strong rapport. Talk about how you are important and why you make an excellent candidate. And I know that a lot of our alumni, they're definitely involved in the community, whether that's, organizations like Rotary Club. I know, Synergy, there's a lot of professionals involved in those different organizations. So if you are involved in the community, you can also definitely talk about those experiences. If you are mentoring someone here at UNC Greensboro, or you're mentoring someone out in the community, that is a fantastic thing to include on your resume, especially if you're applying for graduate school. So there are several different things that you can include. And as you see right here, I've included it from the perspective of someone being the vice president of a marketing organization. But anytime you're raising money, that's a great thing to include on your resume or CV. Anytime that you're providing direction or that you are lending a helping hand, those are great things that show how you go above and beyond when working with specific populations, working with the community. So I always highly recommend including leadership experiences in either your resume or your CV. And then this is just some information, organization experience. So this is very similar to how we talked about before. If you are supervising a specific number of people, if you're providing that direction, if you're coordinating with either national office or if you're coordinating with people within your company. So this is just another example of how you can go above and beyond describing, providing the details with your work experience. So skills and proficiencies, it's a common section. And a lot of times I like to include it at the end of your resume, just because it's a nice, strong section to end with when the employer is looking over your information. As I mentioned before, if you are a computer, tech, or social media individual, I would actually put this higher on your resume, just because if you know Python or C#, any of the other programming languages, which I unfortunately do not have any experience with, but you want to showcase that to an employer. Also, foreign language or secondary language, international language, if you know Spanish, if you know Chinese, if you know Mandarin, also American Sign Language could be included as a secondary language. Also, technical, career specific. With the skills section, if I say that I know how to speak Spanish fluently, if I tell someone that I'm CPR certified, if I'm able to tell someone that I know specifically that I'm certified for translating American Sign Language, that person may not know how to speak Spanish or may not know American Sign Language, but they have an idea of what that is. Now, if I include a soft skill like customer service, leadership, budget management, those are all great terms. Those are terms that employers are looking for. But if I just include those terms by themselves, employers have no idea what that means to you. So if you are putting budget management on your resume, talk about how you are working specifically at your company overseeing a budget of $10,000 related to community outreach. Talk about the amount of money that's in that budget. Talk about who it's impacting. If you just put customer service in your skills section, it looks good, but you can make it look better. You can make it mean something when you're describing your soft skills and your past work experience. So remember, for the skills and proficiencies, make sure that that they are specific when it comes to secondary languages, whether that's technology or whether that's certifications. And then also the consistency. So if you're talking about your education and you italicize your master's degree, make sure you italicize your bachelor's. Make sure that you're utilizing white space effectively. One line of white space between each section, margins anywhere from 0.5 to 1 inch. Also make sure that your font is consistent throughout. So whether you're doing Arial, Times New Roman, Calibre, and make sure that the size throughout is consistent. The only time that it shouldn't be consistent is your name is always going to be bigger because you're going to attract the attention of the employer. You're always going to want to make sure your name stands out. So your resume font, anywhere from 10 to 12 point font, make sure it's not too small that they can't read it. Also make sure it's not too big that it's just overwhelming. And then references. So references will be a separate document. A lot of times people do include references with their CV. At the end of the day, references, it's not that it's a deal breaker that you include them on your resume. It's just that often employers will usually ask for them as a separate document, and you can be utilizing that space, that white space on your resume to talk about your leadership experience, mentoring people, or to talk about your experience working at a company for the past 4+ years. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing the space on your resume responsibly, and that, as I mentioned before, you're telling the employer the important things that they need to know. So right now, those are the fundamentals when it comes to resumes. I know I've seen a couple of questions coming through, so we're going to take the opportunity to answer some of those questions. But right now, we're going to answer some of those questions, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Handshake. I'm going to talk about our virtual career fair and how you can utilize some of our online resources to find those jobs that may be a little bit more obscure. I know a lot of people said that they were struggling finding specific jobs, but we're going to help you with that after we answer some of these questions.
Justin, I got one question from a participant about whether or not they'd have access to our slides after the session. And so I just wanted to let folks know that we are recording this and that you will have access to it. And we will share with you a few electronic resources that you'll have access to after the session is over too.
Perfect. Let's see, do we have any questions?
So there's a question about who to contact to have a personal statement for graduate school reviewed. So Justin, do you want to talk just a moment about the appointment request process?
Yeah, most definitely. So there are 2 ways that you can request an appointment with any of our career coaches. That includes me, Megan, Stephanie, Christina. Also, our wonderful graduate assistants will be returning to campus in August. But in order to schedule an appointment with us for personal statement, resume, cover letter, mock interviews, you could either call our office, and our wonderful front desk office manager, Amelia, will be happy to schedule that with you. Our front desk employees will be happy to schedule you an appointment. Or you can, if you don't have a Handshake account yet, what you can do is you can go on our website, and there's actually a slide that I have talking about the specifics, and I'll go over it in a second. But you can actually request an account with Handshake, and you can go online. There's a section that says Career Services, where you can schedule an appointment, and we have a wide, vast array of different resources that we provide to students. What you're going to want to do if you're looking for personal statements specifically, you would click on personal statement, which is actually an hour-long appointment. So whether it's virtual or whether it's face-to-face as we go further into the fall, but we would be able to specifically, whether that's helping you get started on a get started on a personal statement, or actually talk about what are the requirements, and also, reviewing that document, we would be more than happy to do that. But you can either go through handshake.uncg.edu to request an account and then schedule it online, or you can call our office, and either Amelia or our front desk employees would be happy to schedule that for you. Great question.
Justin, we have another question about if the things that we include about our education, or where we include them on our resume, changes the farther we get into our career. So should I still be listing my GPA if I graduated 4 years ago? So things like that, just some general information about what might change the longer you're out of school.
Yeah, most definitely. So with your education section, I would still include your GPA. I know I still include my GPA from both my master's and my bachelor's experience. Now, let's say, for instance, if you were involved in an organization like Omicron Delta Kappa, or, it could be like an honor society or national, I'm trying to think off the top of my head some of the different honor societies that there were. Now, as you get further away from school, you may choose to take NHRA off your resume, or any of the different organizations or honor societies that you are a part of. If you have more work experience that would be more relevant for the employer to know about, I would always stay with including your GPA if it's above a 3.0. If it isn't at a 3.0, you can definitely take it off. But I still think that there are enough job recruiters who have mentioned specifically, there are some job recruiters that state specifically, I look at a person's GPA when looking at their candidacy. There are also some job recruiters that say, I didn't have a GPA of 3.0 when I was going through college. I mean, there's a lot of people, and I know, I kind of include myself in that your undergraduate degree, your GPA may not have been what you wanted it to be. And then you go to graduate school or get your master's, and you do a whole lot better because you're studying specifically what you want to study. So there are a couple of different ways that you could think about that. With your education, when it comes to the actual placement on the resume, I am still a big believer, and some of my fellow colleagues may have some different thoughts on this. I still want to see the education somewhere on the first page of your resume if you have multiple. I still think that it's important. That it is, I still believe that is important enough that it is somewhere specifically that it's going to be one of the first things that an employer sees. But as you get further down the road, if you have more work experience, it may be more relevant to put the work experience before you put your education. And sometimes people will ask the question, when is the cutoff for deciding to take off work experience? Sometimes you could think of it from the perspective of 5 years to 7 years, or what is based on the responsibilities that you had at that previous workplace. If something is 7 years old but is still more relevant, you may still choose to include that on your resume. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to think about the employer, you want to think about your audience who is looking at the document, because at the end of the day, it's not a deal breaker if your education's not first. You can choose to include it further down, but I still want us to make sure that it's somewhere on the first page, and that it's clearly defined that this is your education, this is your degree, this was your minor, this was your GPA. So I still think that it is important to think about that, even if you've been away from school for several years.
Justin, I see two other questions that I want to make sure we get to. One is about following up. So at the beginning, you asked the poll question about what seems to be obstacles for folks. So there's a question about how long do I wait to follow up, and how many times should I follow up after I apply? What's the polite etiquette here?
Yeah, that is definitely understandable. So a lot of times when you're applying to a company, you may call the human resources department for that company or that organization, and you could ask specifically where they are in their process. Now, I know that this differs based on the industry, so I'll tell you, for applying to a public university like UNC Greensboro, they have specific deadlines with specific jobs where they can't contact people until after that deadline has passed. So when you're looking at a job description, if you see that there's a deadline for a specific job, you definitely want to be mindful of when the deadline is, because it may be if you're applying for a government job, if you're applying for a public university, they may not be able to contact candidates until that deadline has passed and they have, you know, a good number of candidates who have applied for that position. Now, I'd still apply as soon as possible because I've heard, you know, there are some companies where they're looking at the first 50 people who have applied. If they find 20 qualified people in that stack, they may not look at the 50 to 100 people who applied as the deadline got closer. But for following up with an employer, there may be some employers who due to the nature of the work that they're doing, they won't contact the candidates until after the deadline has passed. A good rule of thumb to think about is if you have any questions, I would contact the Human Resources Department to either ask politely where they are in the process of hiring for this specific position. You could also state when you specifically applied for the position, and also be mindful of like what the posting number was for the position. But I would contact the Human Resources Department, and I would probably contact them once during the process, just to find out where the specific, you know, where the search committee is in their process of evaluating and reviewing candidates for this position.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. We also received a question about what about intended graduation? So there's someone on the call with us today who is starting a master's program in the fall. How and when can they list that on their resume?
Okay. Well, first, congratulations on attending the master's program. That is excellent. For the intended graduation program, a lot of times I don't even put expected or intended. I would just put the date, the month, and the year for the graduation, because most employers understand that when they see May 2022, that person is either working, you know, in this case, it may be a 2-year master's degree, it may be a 3-year master's degree, but they understand that the student is currently going towards their degree. Now, I know with masters and PhD specifically, there may be an adjustment with that time frame. Just, you know, due to any number of circumstances. If you do need to change it on your resume or your CV, I would just, you know, update it. I would, you know, state what the new graduation date is. But all you need to do is include the month and the year, and an employer will understand whether you're a first year or second year master's student with the information that you provide in your education. Now, if you want to put expected, you can put expected, but they will understand that you're currently working towards your degree.
Let's see. Okay, in the chat, I have dropped links to both our resume guide and our CV guide. There was a question about the difference between the two, and I'll just say that sometimes the difference between the two of those documents is semantics. Sometimes recruiters use resume and CV the same because they're not even sure about the difference between the two. But from the perspective of our office, when we work with folks who are intending to apply for academic positions or to continue their education, to work at a university or a college, we suggest that folks use a CV. It is a longer, more academically focused record of your experience. So a CV doesn't have the length, the maximum length that a resume does, but it usually is featuring information that is more important to a setting of academia than to a corporate workforce. So those two guides you can find here in the chat, and those are open source on our website, so you can find them at any time.
And I do want to
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the CV guide is amazing. It just got updated last year. One of our great graduate assistants, Asia, was in charge of reviewing and updating it. But there are some great examples. Let's say, for instance, on a CV and you're a little bit more academically focused, if you've gone to a conference and you've presented, that is something that would be excellent to include on your CV. Whereas if you're applying to maybe a more of a corporate job, depending on what you're applying to, they may not, place as much emphasis on that. But there's a great example in the CV guide about how to include your presentations, or even if you just attend a conference, you can still include that on your CV, how you attended as a general member. Also, any publications that you've either assisted a professor with or that you yourself has published. There's some great examples there. And I don't know how many people on the call today are working at nonprofits, but a lot of times in nonprofit work, people have the great experience of writing and submitting a grant. And there's a great example in our CV guide about how whether you received that grant or even if you didn't receive that grant, but still showcasing if you're applying to an academic institution or nonprofit, but there's still a great example of how you can showcase your experiences applying and submitting grants.
Justin, I want to share one more question that has come in the chat and then just make mention that we're coming up on 3 o'clock. Some of us on the career development team have time to hang back and answer additional questions. Justin has created some more content about Handshake and about searching for jobs. So you're welcome to stay with us as long as you'd like, and you will get access to this recorded presentation. But the question that was dropped into the chat that I want to make sure we speak to is that folks are noticing positions being reposted and hundreds of applicants are applying for these positions. And so there's a question about, could that possibly be because of a hiring freeze and a restarting of the process? And no matter what the reason is, how do we make ourselves stand out when we're applying and we have so much competition? So I invite you to answer any parts of that question, and then we'll pitch in where we need to.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to applying for a position, and sometimes when you're applying to a position, you get the automated response that a position or has either been canceled, or maybe the search for it has either been frozen or paused or different things like that. If you are told that, so when it comes to, if a position has been reposted, usually the employer will tell you if you need to reapply for the position. Because sometimes if a position's been frozen or the hiring has been paused, basically, it's a holding pattern at that moment. And what the employer is telling you is that, they reviewed multiple candidates' positions, unfortunately due to circumstances out of their hands, it will be reposted at another time period. If it is reposted and the original search has been canceled, I would reapply for the position. If the people for the position have sent you something saying that the search has been canceled and that it will be posted at a later date, I would go ahead and reapply for that position. Just because it's going to be a fresh search, there may be a new search committee, whether that's in corporate or whether that's in education or healthcare. But it usually is a whole new process when it comes to a position being posted. Now, for the second part of that question, how do you stand out? My personal belief is that when you're describing your work experience and you're describing some of the different activities that you've been involved in, some of those soft skills, that's how you stand out, either by talking about that quantitative information of how many people you were either able to supervise, mentor, talking about the positive results of what you've accomplished at a company. Because when we talked about some of those different examples that we were taking a look at, if you're a community leader, if you're mentoring people, if you're raising money for a specific project or a specific subject, that could be something that no one else has even thought of putting on their resume, putting on their CV. So those positive results, that can be something that can separate you from other individuals. And as I mentioned before, there are some companies that if they, and I know that, this is where you have to like really prioritize and think about, because I know I'm somebody, and I'll just self-disclose this. I usually wait till the last minute before putting the final touches on something. I was practicing for this presentation like up till 10 minutes before 2 o'clock. So I am somebody that, I definitely, I want to make sure something is as good as possible. So I'm waiting up to the deadline. But if I'm applying for a position where there's 150 people who have applied for that position, they look at the first 50 people, they see 20 candidates who are outstanding that they really want to take a look at. There could be 50 more people who are outstanding for that position, but they never even took a look at their resume. And that can, and sometimes people can find that out. They may know somebody within the company that they know specifically, and they can ask, why was my candidacy not, considered? And it's just that their documents were never looked at because the company found 20 excellent candidates, and their human resources, they decided to interview those 20 candidates. So I would say, definitely make sure that your application is the way that you want it to, but make sure that you apply early in the process. I would say the latest you should apply for a job is a week before the deadline. So make sure that your application is in early. Make sure you're talking about your positive results of the work that you've done in the past, whether that's overseeing a specific budget, whether that's teaching a specific population. Definitely provide the details, who you're working with, who benefited from your work, what was it that you were able to bring to the table that was a positive thing for that company. So make sure that you apply early in the process, that you include your positive results, and that you use the employer terminology.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. At the beginning of this session, you may have heard some of us refer to one-on-one resume appointments that we have available next week. And in the chat box, our colleague Sam is going to drop a link to register for one of those appointments. So if you're looking for more help on your resume in particular, and you would like to work one-on-one with a coach about the details of your document or a certain job that you're applying for, we would love for you to sign up for an appointment. If you follow this link and you cannot find a time that works for you, I encourage you to be in touch with one of us from the Career Center or with UB, who's also on the call. We'll be keeping track of a waiting list and making sure that we can offer you as much support as possible. We know that a lot of resume support is individualized, right? A lot of times people ask us questions and our answer is, well, it depends. And we want to be able to get to the direct answer to that. And that happens most frequently in a one-on-one situation. So please follow that link, sign up for an appointment. We're really excited to work with you all.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Justin. This was a very useful one here. That is why I've been in and out. But she says hi. Thank you guys so much for hosting this webinar. We appreciate the hard work that you've put into this. It was very helpful. I did see a lot of questions regarding graduate school. And my question to you all is, if you are interested in graduate school workshops, please specify what type of workshops would you like to see from our office. We are happy to put these together and get these resources out to you, reach out to our campus partners so that we can give you that information and you are able to put your best foot forward. So if you would like to just, put those in the chat or, send us an email, happy to connect with you guys and, hear from you especially. So thank you guys. If you guys want to have any closing remarks.
Yeah, most definitely. I didn't get a chance to talk about Handshake, but I'll be happy, I could hang back, today if anybody has any questions about utilizing Handshake. One thing I did want to say, so registering for Handshake, as I mentioned, this is the steps or the ways to go about doing this. And I'll be happy if you want to send this slide or any of the slides to any of the people on the call today. You're more than welcome. Anybody can have them. I mean, they're not secret. So, if anybody needs access to it, we are more than happy to do that.
We'll definitely share those with you guys, people that are registered on for this webinar, and we'll follow up with the resources that were listed on the chat, and also let the slide go.
And just one more thing before we go today, we are having a virtual fall career fair. This is going to be a new thing for us. I mean, we'll just, full disclosure, honesty, this will be exciting for us because this is going to be the first virtual career fair that we are going to have at the university. Our colleague, Michael Clinton, is doing an amazing job talking with employers and getting that set up for us. But that is going to be Wednesday, September 23rd from 1 to 4:30 p.m. in the on Handshake. So RSVP to Handshake, but we are going to have several employers there, looking for both current students and looking for alumnus. I know I've met with alumnus before that had a lot of success at the fall career fair. So definitely RSVP. Like I said earlier, this is a new thing for us, so we're all excited. We're very excited to see how it's going to look because this is a new thing for us. But there are definitely going to be plenty of full-time job opportunities at the virtual fall career fair. Yeah. But basically, that's it for today. If you need any of the slides, I've got some slides with some of the different websites that we have. And like I said, I'll be hanging back if there's any other questions, but I'll, hand it off to Megan, Christina, or Stephanie if they want to say anything. But we're looking forward to seeing the people who have already signed up for Tuesday. And definitely feel free to sign up for an appointment, through Alumni. If you want to have someone take a look at your resume or your marketing materials, we are more than happy to help.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We'll send an email to you all with a link to this presentation and with some of our resources attached and contact information so you'll know how to find us after today. A big thank you to UB and Sam from Alumni Engagement for getting us connected with all of you, and thank you so much for signing on. We're excited to help you over the next few weeks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you guys. Have a great day.